How's it going, macroeconomists? All right, you made it. I hope you watched the other videos that lead up to this. This is covering Unit 5. If you haven't, go ahead and check out my channel and find those, and I'll try to link those in the description, or I'll maybe put up the cards or whatever the fancy stuff that we do on the YouTube. Learning how to do all that kind of stuff. So please bear with me. Let's jump into Unit 5. Let's get this done because we got our test on Thursday, May 21st. So this this fifth unit is basically covering how the government stabilizes the economy. I showed you this cartoon, which is supposed to be Uncle Sam or the United States government, and the economy is broken. And so we've got tools of monetary and fiscal policy that we can use. We learn about those tools in other units, but the first part of this unit is basically the combination of those. What happens if we combine fiscal and monetary policy? And ideally, our fiscal and monetary policy actors would coordinate and talk with each other and work with each other to come up with policies that align with each other. That doesn't always happen. But basically, you would just see this if they would ask you what appropriate fiscal and monetary policy actions would be taken, or what mix would be appropriate of this kind of stuff. So it's nothing different from what you've learned before. It's really just reviewing what if we put these two things together, basically. So showing the effects of combining fiscal and monetary policies. Again, the whole goal is to influence AD, real output, price level, and interest rates. Fiscal policy, again, is taxes and spending. You can have discretionary, or they say deliberate up here. That means you made a choice. Non-discretionary are those automatic stabilizers, basically, those things that are already built in. So for us, when we're talking about discretionary fiscal policy, that could be expansionary or contractionary. And then if we're doing expansionary, we'd raise government spending, we'd lower taxes. Contractionary, we'd lower spending, and then we'd raise taxes, basically. Just remember that fiscal policy is controlled by Congress and the president, and that when we pass a new law, that would be an example of fiscal policy, a new law related to taxes or spending. Monetary policy, again, is just the process by which the central bank in the US, that would be the Federal Reserve, controls the money supply. And often they're shifting the money supply to try to achieve stable interest rates, or interest rates that will help achieve the economic goals that they're hoping to achieve during that type of economy. So fiscal and monetary policy combined, again, we just need to review as far as what is fiscal policy, actions of Congress and the president to lower or raise taxes or increase or decrease spending. For monetary policy, it's actions of the central bank. They could do open market operations. They could lower or raise the discount rates. They could also lower or raise the reserve ratio. And let's remember too that open market operations are the buying and selling of bonds. Most of the time they don't ask you specifically should the central bank buy or sell bonds. They'll say what open market operation is best. So keep that in mind. When they say open market operations, they're exclusively talking about buying and selling of bonds. Buy big, sell small. Okay, Phillips curve, the last graph that we need to know for this whole unit, whole semester basically. Short run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. That in the short run Phillips curve, it's downward sloping. Long run Phillips curve is a vertical line at the natural rate of unemployment, that we're always operating somewhere along our SRPC, that we're always somewhere along there, and we're moving up along it or down along it, depending on if we're entering recession or inflation. And that we're in a long run equilibrium at that intersection point of where SRPC and LRPC meet, basically. Points left would be inflationary gaps, and then points right would be recessionary gaps. So remember, it's a mirror of the ASAD model. It's not exactly the same, and that's why students sometimes have trouble with this one. This was the last graph we looked at. Literally the last 2 days of school that we had together, we explored the Phillips curve. So let's just remember that if AD shifts, there's then movement along our Phillips curve. So you can see here, if we were in equilibrium here, and then all of a sudden we went into an inflationary gap, so that would be AD shifting to the right. And now we're in an inflationary gap. That would be movement up along, where we're seeing lower levels of unemployment, but then higher rates of inflation or higher price level you'd see on the ASAD model. If we move down along it, that would be a recessionary gap. So remember, it's a mirror. It's a little bit flipped or reversed, or a mirror image of it. So it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. Let's also remember that if the SRAS shifts, we actually shift our SRPC. So what shifts the SRPC? Basically, if the SRAS shifts, and it goes in an opposite direction. So if the short run average supply shifts right, the short run Phillips curve shifts left. You're right. Good job. Opposite direction of the SRAS. And remember that factors that cause the natural rate of unemployment to change could shift the LRPC. So students always ask me, can the LRPC shift? Yes, but it's super rare, because basically it would have to be something that changed the natural rate of unemployment or the factors that affect that. which technically can change, but it's not very common that we use that in this class. Most of the times, we're just shifting the SRPC or moving along the SRPC. Got a great question for you. This is really good practice FRQ on the Phillips curve, so I recommend you check that out. There's also some practice there at the bottom of that question on real and nominal interest rate practice as well. Quantity theory of money. So inflation and deflation results from increasing and decreasing the money supply. This is basically just the theory that basically when the government or when the central bank changes the money supply, that's going to have an effect on inflation. That when the economy is at full employment, changes in the money supply are not going to affect real output in the long run, basically. So changing the money supply should be a short-term solution to try to fix something problem in the short run, but it shouldn't be a goal for trying to grow the economy. You're not going to grow the economy by just constantly increasing the money supply. All that's going to happen, basically, according to this quantity theory of money, is we're just going to see higher price level. So in the long run, the growth rate of the money supply determines the growth rate of the price level according to the QTM or quantity theory of money. It's M times V, which is money supply times velocity, should equal P times Y or P times Q. Y being output or Q being quantity, overall quantity, and then P being price level there. Government deficits and debts. So basically, if we don't have a balanced budget, which means a balanced budget would mean we spent exactly what we earned in taxes. By we, I mean the federal government. Most of the times we don't run a perfect amount. We don't run perfectly balanced. Most of the times in this country, we actually run budget deficits. But if we taxed more, we collected more in taxes than we spent as a government, that would mean we had a budget surplus. If we spend more than we tax, we run a deficit, which is very common in this country. The last 20 years, we've been running deficits, and those yearly deficits get added to the national debt, basically. So students sometimes like, what's the difference between deficits and debt? They're similar. Deficits are yearly, debt is total. So every year that you spend more than you collect in taxes, you will then have to add that to the national debt, and that will then have to be continually paid down from year to year. So government must increase interest on debt. And the key thing to know about that, why is that a problem? Because we decrease our discretionary spending for the future. Future generations won't be able to spend money because they're going to have to spend a lot of their money paying down the debt of the stuff that we've already purchased and the stuff that we've already bought. So that's the big negative effect of running deficits. Crowding out is basically when the government is in a budget deficit. How do they fix that? They have to borrow money then. And when they borrow money, they go to the loanable funds market. It increases the demand for loanable funds, which raises up the real interest rate. And so crowding out is not something that the government wants to happen. It's an adverse effect that happens because of their need to borrow money, because they need to cover their deficits, basically. The loanable funds market is used to show crowding out, basically, to show that effect of the increased real interest rate. And then who is crowded out, basically? The consumer and the investment owner, the business owner, because they might have been wanting to buy that new factory or buy that new piece of machinery, or I was going to purchase that new car, but all of a sudden the interest rate rose and then I felt like I was crowded out, so then I didn't make that purchase. So it also could have a long-run economic growth effect too. Basically, we're going to see lower capital accumulation, which is going to slow down economic growth. So effective crowding out, you can see it right here. We're basically seeing that the increase in demand is going to raise interest rates, now up to 4%. Now there's people that are going, forget that. I was going to demand a loan at that rate, but now I can't, so forget it. And eventually that just is going to hurt the overall economy and potential for economic growth. All right, economic growth, what is it? It's when we grow as an economy. Hello, of course. What does it mean though? What's the actual definition though? It's basically when we see an increase in real GDP per capita. We want to look at per capita on a per person basis. That matters. Of course, you always want to be increasing real GDP, but you want to look at your total population as well. Aggregate employment and aggregate output are directly rated because firms need to employ more workers in order to produce more output, basically. So employment and output are connected. And we can show that on the ASAD model. Basically, we know that when there's more output, some students are like, well, how do you know that unemployment has gone up or gone down? I'm like, because output's gone up or gone down. So output and unemployment are directly related through something captured called the aggregate production function, which is a new graph. I don't think they're going to introduce it, especially not in these times. But basically, it just shows us that the output per employed worker is a measure of average labor productivity. And it can be determined by the amount of physical capital, the level of technology, and the human capital per worker, basically. Human capital, just like the knowledge and skills that your workers have, their abilities. We can show economic growth with two different graphs. You can show it on the ADAS model, and that would just be by basically shifting the LRAS to the right, which is showing that in the long run, at full employment, we can produce more. Not just a short run, like an inflationary gap, but in the long run, we are now have more production possibilities, basically. And in the PPC model, that's just basically being shown by increasing the PPC or shifting it outwards, basically. That would show that now, in this case, I can produce both more capital goods and consumer goods. Okay, the last question is about what kind of public policies could help economic growth. So just know that the government can definitely pass other laws, not just related to taxes and spending, but laws that can increase infrastructure or increase technology or increase research and development. And that can have the impact of also helping to increase the labor force participation rate, encouraging and creating new incentives for people to join the labor markets or whatever it is. So government policies that affect growth invest in infrastructure, basically roads and bridges and things that we use that our businesses use to run their businesses and provides goods and services and get them around the country. Technology is a great source of economic growth. So a lot of governments will invest in research and development and actually award grants and money to researchers to find new technologies that's going to help the economy as a whole. There's also supply side fiscal policy. There's a group of economists that we call supply side economists. These economists basically think that you should focus on the supply side. So basically they always believe in lowering taxes on businesses. They say the more that you lower taxes on businesses and take away regulations, it's just going to basically increase the government's ability to grow, because then businesses don't have to spend as much on taxes, and they don't or if you give them more subsidies too. Supply side economists also advocate for more subsidies to small businesses and also larger corporations in the overall goal of basically trying to grow the economy, basically. So there are some government public policies that the government could pass to try to increase economic growth, and those are just some examples of those. So supply side policies basically is situations or policies that can affect short run aggregate supply and long run aggregate supply. Basically, any policy that changes the determinant of SRAS will lead to long run economic growth. Demand side policies, Keynes wasn't a supply sider. He was focused on the demand side. So Keynes was all about trying to increase government spending and also increase the money that the consumer has. So this is just basically two different schools of economic thought. They won't have you go into this. This is just, depending on what school, when you major in economics, different schools have different theories that they push on their students and that kinds of stuff. And a lot of it is related to ideology. A lot of Democrats tend to be demand siders, and a lot of conservatives and Republicans tend to be supply siders. The determinants of the long run aggregate supply are, again, resources, actions of government, those kind of supply side policies or those infrastructure policies or investment policies or technology policies. Also trying to increase technological advances. Those could all have the effect of effectively increasing your long run aggregate supply. If they're long-term fixes, if they're just short run things, then they won't be shifting that LRAS. Okay, causes of economic growth, again, investment, changes in the availability of resources or quality of resources, productivity, and technology. Growth policy would basically just be anything to increase any of those things. So any kind of policy that increases businesses to invest, that increases the availability of resources or increases labor productivity or increases ways for us to access new technology, all of those would be good policies that we could use as a government to try to increase economic growth. Okay, I have a lot of great FRQs, and these are, at the very end here, these FRQs are actually including all the units. I have two really great examples where they don't include the foreign exchange market, and they basically exclude Unit 6, which is rare on these. So the 2015 number 1 FRQ, I highly recommend you check this out, give it a try, and then check your answers. And if you have any questions, you can email me. I'm happy to set up a Google Meet or happy to answer any questions you have via email. I've got the answers also included in the slideshow. And I have another one from 2014. Again, it includes basically all the units. So this is not just exclusive to Unit 5, but really good practice. And I've also got those answers included as well. Okay, this right here, and I will try to remember to link this down in the description below. I showed you in the first video, and I linked it, but it's a Mr. Clifford Everything You Need to Know. And that is basically a 30-minute video. He also did a smaller review video that's 15 minutes. So it's shorter, and it doesn't have all his fancy computers and stuff, all the graphics that he does and editing that he does. It's just basically something he did clearly on just a piece of paper and stuff. But it's still really cool, and he does just kind of quickly go over the overview. So I'll link that down in the description below. It's just a quicker review from Mr. Clifford that he did, a quick review of just all we need to know. So, warning, Unit 6 will not appear on the 2020 exam, which means you don't need to learn it ever. No, not you. You can learn it. It's really important to know foreign exchange and all that kind of stuff. But it's not going to appear on the exam, so we want to be efficient with our use of resources because of scarcity. We only have so much time left. So I would say don't look at Unit 6. If you have future questions about those, feel free. As always, I am your economics teacher for life. Your government teacher for life. So if you ever have a question, I am here for you. Please email me. Let me know if you need any help at all. Good luck with your studying. Keep graphing. Practice your formulas. As always, keep calm and Viking on.